going on, guys, and a big welcome to our channel. We are Team Crushing the Meta. I'm here for you guys with deck profile, and it is on G-eara Overlord slash BladeMaster. So the thing is, I have always liked BladeMaster a lot. I think it's an amazing deck, and also I have like a special connection with the deck because if you go to the name and the origin to some of the cards, they are Arab. Especially the names of the Dragon Knights and the Dragon Dancers, they're all Arabic. So that's amazing because I'm Arab, or my origins is Arab. So that's why I also like playing this deck a lot. So if you hear me say some of the names differently, then that's because that's the way we pronounce them. But you may pronounce them the way that you like, I don't mind. Also, let's go through the deck and let me explain some of the skills for the older cards and the most of the new cards. I will not explain their skills, but if you want me to, just put the comment in the comment section below and I will make a longer video to talk about the combos of the deck and what the deck is going to do and how good it is and why do I play it. So the deck is pretty good. It is not a meta deck, I will give you that, but it is very good and it could come as a surprise for some of the other decks, and also it has a lot of good matchups. The only downside to this deck is it doesn't really have that broken combo that could win you the game. It wins you the game by getting some crits on a resending Vanguard that hits your opponent once or twice and they lose. That's how the deck wins games, and also just messing with your opponent by destroying their combos. So going into the first grade 3, we're playing 4 copies of Dragonic Overlord. Of course, the one from the V series. You can play any art that you like. I really like this art the most. If you don't know what he or why he's in this deck, the most important thing is he gives you the force marker, and if you go first, then Dragonic Overlord becomes an amazing card because he already has the resending ability if he hits your opponent's Vanguard. And mostly, he is 13 by having the force marker underneath him. He is 23, and then using his own ability by Soul Blessing 1, he's 33. 33 going to your opponent Vanguard is a lot to guard, so they should have drop a PG that early in the game, or they would have to take the first attack. If you get a crit, you're already putting them at 4, or let's say at 3 damage, and then you restand, you attack again, they have to guard that, or they will be at 5 damage, which is a lot. So that's the good thing about this card. Also, there's another reason, but we'll go into that later on. So for Dragonic Overlord, keep him at 4. I've tried him at 3, but I don't see him that much, so at 4 is, in my opinion, better. Next card is, we have the ace of the deck, 4 copies of Dragonic BladeMaster. Let's zoom in a little bit on his skill because that's important. The first ability is Blaze. If you don't know what Blaze is, it's whenever something attacks your Vanguard or Rearguard and attack your opponent, and then you have more Rearguards than your opponent, your Blaze ability will go off and it will stay till the end of the turn. When you have Blaze, some of your other ability will go off, but we'll go into that when you go into each and every card. So his second ability is the Counterblast 1, and then when you stride, you retire one of your opponent's Rearguards and you give one of your units with the Blaze ability an extra 3k. Mostly you will give it to the Vanguard because he is only in 11k, and because of that, sometimes when you attack into a Force or a Protect or an Excel, doesn't really matter, but any of the new more than 11k Vanguards, that will be 5k less for them to guard. But if you give him the 3k and you're already attacking twice, that will make a difference, that extra 5k, or in this case, the 1k or 2k, or just give him 3k and then it's good. Her third ability, and also one of the most important abilities that he has, is of course at the end of each turn, so your turn and your opponent's turn, if your opponent doesn't have a Rearguard on the field, you can get a grade 3 back to your hand. That's an important ability, and most of the time you could get the right grade 3 back to your hand, but it needs to have the Blaze ability. So you can't get back an Overlord, you have to get him back or the next grade 3 that we will show you. Alright, talking about the next card that we will show you is the Strike. Wyvern Strike. Wyvern Strike is a very good card. The good thing about this card is it has 3 abilities, the same as him. The first one is Blaze, the second one is a Counter Blast and a Soul Blast, and you can retire one of your opponent's Vanguards in the same column as him. And then his third ability is a continuous ability, and if your Vanguard is blazing, this unit gets an extra 2k for each of your opponent Vanguards in the back row. So this card, if your opponent doesn't have any Vanguard in the back row, could get an extra 6k, makes him a 17k attacker, which is perfect if you go against Protector XL, and becomes 1k less of a perfect card when you go against, let's say, a Force Clan. But most importantly, the extra power that he gets will make a difference because you have him on the field and you can attack with him multiple times. If your opponent gets rid of this card, that's okay, because he goes to the drop zone and you can get him back with the BladeMaster Cohen ability. So that's it for the grade 3s, playing 4-4-1. I like having the extra grade 3 in here. Also, it's nice retirement power if you really need to, but the soul in this deck isn't something that you need to manage very good, so I would not advise you to be very reckless with the soul. Going to the grade 2 lineup, the first card that I like to run in here is the 4 copies of Mubdi. Mubdi, in my opinion, is a really good card. If you don't know what he does, let's zoom in and read him together. So he has, of course, the Blaze ability, which is good. So you can give your Vanguard Blaze if it doesn't have Blaze, because the Blaze ability goes off even if your Vanguard doesn't have Blaze, as long as you have a Blaze something on the field, a Vanguard or a Vanguard. And of course his second ability is a GB2, or no wait, yeah, it's a GB2 ability, and it's a Counter Blast 1 when this unit attacks a Vanguard. You may pay the cost, and you can only do that if you have a Blazing Vanguard and a Vanguard with the BladeMaster in its card name. Then you can draw a card and get an extra 2k for every open Vanguard circle your opponent has. So that means that you can give this card an extra 10k, but also this card could easily draw you a card. So when playing BladeMaster, there are 2 things that you could do with your Counter Blasts. The first thing is you draw cards with cards like these. The second thing is you retire your opponent's Vanguards. Talking about retire your opponent's Vanguard but not paying a Counter Blast is the next card that we have, which also is a 4-off. 4 copies of Dragon Knight Yasser. Yasser is a card that we got late in the G-eara. The card is really good, and it's made to be played in this deck. Why? First thing is, his cost is only a Soul Blast. Second thing is, he retires your opponent's whole column, which means if they have resist units, it doesn't matter. They still get retired because he doesn't target. So by only paying 1 Soul Blast, you can retire the whole column of your opponents, and that's just perfect. So what he does, or Soul Blast 1, when this card attacks, you get an extra 5k, which is good, so he could hit something, and then your opponent cannot intercept, and at the end of that battle, you retire the whole column. Even if you have a booster behind him, that booster gets retired, so keep that in mind. Next card is, we have 2 copies of Berserker Dragon. Berserker Dragon is not Berserk Dragon. Berserker Dragon is a card that we got later on in the, if I'm not mistaken, the Legend deck of Kai. So what he does, it's pretty cool ability actually. It has a nice interact with some of your great ones that counter charge. It's a GB1 ability. Also, you need to have a grade 4 Vanguard to activate the ability. Whenever your grade 4 Vanguard attacks, you may Counter Blast 1, and then you retire one of your opponent's Vanguards, which is a grade 2 or less. Why is this card good, and why is this card in this deck? Because of the timing that you use that Counter Blast, or you pay that Counter Blast, and that's the good thing about this card. But you could also take him out to play Berserker Dragon, which I only have at 1, because I really don't want to pay the Soul Blast. The thing is, this card is amazing to ride, because you retire something in the early game and you draw something. And later on, it's also good because it becomes a 13k and it's 10k and could get more power if like you have the Blaze, which is just having more Vanguards than your opponent. But yeah, the card is good. Definitely when you ride him, later on in the game he becomes less interesting, let's say. So that's why I have him at 1. I know that it's not consistent, but I actually see him and ride him a lot. So I really don't mind having this card at 1. But you could take him, like, you could take these out to play 1 more, and you can take also one G-eara to play 4 copies of him if you really want to. But I think for this deck you don't have to, because you can get the draw later on for that counterblast anyway if you really need to. One thing that will get your opponent surprised is actually Yasser. Yasser is a really good card, and I would advise you to play him at 4. Next we have the Great Ones. This is when things become a bit weird, weirder than my Grade 2 lineup. The first thing is we have Dragon Knight Nidal. Nidal is amazing. What he does is he gives you the counter charges that you need. Of course, he has the Blaze ability, and then he has the once per turn ability. I first misread this card, and then with some of my friends, we talked about it, and I understood it a little bit better. Because the thing is, it's all about the Blaze ability and the wording of the text. That when you have this card on the field and you retire something, he gets the auto ability. He gets that only once. That's why the once per turn. But he gets the auto ability, which is whenever your Vanguard becomes blazing, you may countercharge 1. So it's not when your Vanguard attacks, it's just when he becomes blazing. So that means I thought first, like, I could resend the Vanguard, attack again with it, it becomes blazing again, I could countercharge 1 more. No, that doesn't work like that. When he comes blazing, you countercharge, so this card gets you 1 countercharge and the extra 4k once per turn. So it's still good, because I would rather have this card that gives you the countercharge but stay on the field than like Ermo from the V series, which could countercharge you but leaves the field. It depends on the format that you play. When we go into maybe more Link Jokers, then I could take this card out to play the Ermo. But for now, and keeping the BladeMaster, let's say, theme for the deck, I'm playing 4 copies of him. Next card, I'm talking about the BladeMaster theme. We still play 3 copies of the Strike Folder. Why? Because it's important to get BladeMaster to your hand. Sometimes you have the Overlord, and you have the Wavering Strike or 2 Overlords. Just put this card on the field, show your opponent a grade 3, get BladeMaster to your hand, or stride with it if you need to. Then we have more retirement power, because sometimes you need it, and that is 3 copies of Bar. This is the card from the V series that we play in the Grade 1 lineup, the only card actually. You could take this out to play Ermo, or you can take this out to play the one that gives your Vanguard the extra crit. Forgot his name, but you can do that as well because you have a resending Vanguard. But mostly, sometimes you really need that extra retirement power. Sometimes you need it in the early game. If you don't get your Berserker Dragon to your hand, then this card acts like the same way. So it's a good thing. Also, the good thing about this card is it does have the 10k shield, which in BladeMaster does matter because you draw a lot of cards. Next, we play 2 copies of the Energy Flame. Well, this card gives you the soul and the counter charge that you need. So what it does is whenever something is retired by your ability, something of your opponent by your ability, you may put this card into the soul and you counter charge 2. Also, it doesn't really matter when you retire. So even retiring in your opponent's turn, this skill will get off. And most importantly, the counter charge 2 and a soul charge 1 is really good. I would rather have counter charge 2 and soul charge 1 than have an Ermo that retires, doesn't go to the soul, and counter charge only 1. So I would play this card to replace Ermo, because I think it's better for this deck at least. And yeah, that's why I put him at 2. You could put him at more if you need to, but I think it's more than enough to have him at 2. Last but not least, I play 1 PG. It could be any PG that you like. I'm going with Bari because I also play the draw PGs Bari. So it's nice. I play 3 of those and just 1 of him. That's it for the great ones. Let's jump into the triggers. For the trigger lineup, we're going with 4 copies of the V-Heal. Why? One answer. I don't have the counter charge ones. If you have the counter charge ones, you can play 2 on 2, or 3-on-1 or whatever you like. I'm putting this at 4 because it's a full arts, and that's a good argument, and I don't have the other one yet. I will try to get him, at least her, 2 times so I could play 2-on-2 if needed. But for the VC, they're really good because they have a lot of shield and they also give you power. Then for the critical triggers, we are playing a lot of crits. 4 of her, or it's 3 of Tar, and 2 of Yannet. So it's a bit weird, but I really wanted to play the 3 PGs. So having the 3 PGs in here would mean that we have to cut some crits out. Crits are important in this deck because you really want to see crit or 2, especially in the early game when you attack with your Overlord. You want to see a crit, and Yannet right here is good because it does give you the soul that you need. But mostly these are amazing. As a guard value, they are amazing, and also the power that they gives your Vanguard are good. So I would rather play more of these, but because now I'm trying to manage my soul, and having the 4-3-2 is a little bit satisfying. So that's why I put it like this. But I don't mind if you want to cut one of him out to play like an extra crits. You could also cut this to play one more draw trigger. You have one more space in your grade 1 lineup to play anything else. But I would rather play just the 7 crits, or 9 crits, or just play 10 crits. That's also good. But don't play less than 8. Please don't play less than 8. I've seen people play the stand triggers in this deck. I've tried it out. It doesn't work for my playstyle, but that's also a possibility. If you do that, then I would advise you to change the grade 2 lineup to have more of the hit pressure or more powerhouses, but that's really up to you. For me, I'm keeping it at this for now, and maybe change it in the future if I get like more cards that are playable in this deck. So for the starter, you have 2 choices. Don't play both, just play one. For now, I'm going with Undux, but you could always take him out to play the one and only best starter in the game, Conroe or Mega Trainer. Mega Trainer is better because he's in spikes, but Conroe is good. Having the counterblast in the early game could be hurtful, and having the extra soul is good. So that's why I play him, because he doesn't cost a counterblast and he has soul and he gives you a draw. While Conroe could get you anything to your hand, though in the, let's say sometimes you need a heal trigger early on to have your GB ready. That's a possibility, but I like Undux. But that's my personal preference. If you like the Conroe, you could play Conroe. I do understand that completely. For these strides, we will start with your first stride, which could be one of these 2. It doesn't really matter, depending on if your opponent has Regards on the field, and depending on if you have enough counterblasts to work with. He is better in most situations, but he costs you a counterblast and you need to have Blaze. If your opponent keep putting Regards on the field, then I would go with him, just have the hit pressure, because you can't get Blaze anyway, so there is no reason to go to him. He doesn't cost you a counterblast, so that's a good thing. And he draws your card, that's a better thing, but it depends again on the situation. If you could get Blaze off and you have counterblast, go for this card. If you cannot get Blaze off and you do not have counterblast, or you do not have counterblast, then just go for this card. Both of them flip you something, so your GB2 is already ready and active. Then we have 4 copies of Ziegenberg. Ziegenberg is your main go-to stride. Actually, this card is amazing and it is pretty much made for this deck. It has also 3 abilities. The first one is the Blaze ability. The second one is an Act by Soul Blasting 1, which is heavy for this deck for some reason. And flipping him face up from your G-zone, you could retire one of your opponent Regards. That's a good thing because then you will have your Blaze off, and then you will have your opponent have less cards on the field, and that's when your BladeMaster ability could go off and you don't have to discard a lot of cards with this. And he does give you the extra GB that you sometimes need if you G-guard once. Let's say you G-guard once and then you go into him, then you need that GB to use his third ability. His third ability is a GB3, a counterblast 1, and you choose any number of cards from your hand, discard them as much as your opponent have rare cards on the field. If you do so, you could restand this card and it gets drive check -2. So it has only one drive check. This card is really good. The cost is definitely not heavy, but you need to manage your Counterblast and your Soul Blast to go good with this card. The next card that we have in here is a card that I will be replacing in the future. It's 2 copies of Root Flare. Root Flare is been replaced by Yasser, the grade 2 that gets rid of the whole column. The Root Flare is nice, and I really like having him because it's a card that we played in the old school days and it was really nice to have, and it does everything that Kagero needs it to do, let's say. But this card will be replaced with the Purge. The Purge, you could activate both of his skills because you play Overlord, and the second skill is just a GB3. So the Purge will definitely go in this deck, but I don't have him yet, and this card will be replaced by the Purge when we have the new collection, the Revival collection. The Revival collection will give us the Purge and the full art, and I will definitely try to get that and play him at 2 in this deck. And to have even more options as strides and some of the finishers, we have the GB8 in here, which is also a very good card. It's perfect to have as GB8 for Kagero because it just gets rid of your opponent's field and gives you a lot of power and a crit. So that's good, it's perfect. And it doesn't cost a Counterblast or something, so that's perfect. Last but not least, we have the Drachma. Drachma is nice, Drachma is good, and he could punish your opponent pretty hard. But if you don't win with him, then you have to fall back on the Overlord. That's sometimes a bad thing, but again, he does keep or put your opponent as a situation where your opponent would cry and cry and cry a little bit more. I don't think that I have to explain Drachma, right? Next for the G Guardians, we're going with 2 copies of Abu Salam. It's amazing to have this card have this name. It's just so ironic for me. I know it means nothing to you guys, but for me it means a lot. This card is good. By counterblasting 1, he gets an extra 10k for every open rare circle your opponent has, so he could becomes a huge powerhouse if your opponent is not committing to the field. Next card is a card that gives a lot of people a lot of nightmares, which is Denial Griffin. You need to put him at 2, definitely not play him at 1. If you need to play him at 3, that's a possibility, but I took the third one out to play this card. It's the one and only, you know what it is, you know who he is, it's Defeat Flare. Defeat Flare Dragon is really hardcore. This card could let your opponent get him definitely surprised that you play him in this deck because you don't play a lot of Overlords. It's a BladeMaster deck. But the good thing about this card is he needs Flames Dragon in your drop zone. And you need an Overlord Vanguard. But when you go back from a BladeMaster to an Overlord, or you couldn't get your Overlord yet, but you have like enough Flame Dragons in your drop zone, then he works. Because all of your grade 3 are Flame Dragons except him. So even if you have like him in your drop zone, you could get that back to your deck and use his ability. I don't really use him because most of the time I go from Overlord to a BladeMaster, and then I never go back to the Overlord because most of your abilities need BladeMaster. Also, he gets the retirement power and the GB2 ability. But if you really need or want to mess with your opponent, then definitely stay on Overlord, kick their ass with this card, and then go to BladeMaster. Last but not least, for the G guards, I play one of the Unflipper. Sometimes he helps out to get to Drachma and to the GB8 if needed, and also could get your opponent caught him by surprise by retiring one of the rested rare guards, which is a great one, and it needs to be in the back row. Yeah. You may pay the cost, which is flipping and soul blasting, and then you may pay the cost if you do choose one of your opponent grade 1 or less rested rare guards and retired. Oh, it doesn't need to be in the back row, just grade 1 or less. Grade 1 or less. Yeah, pretty nice. Grade 1 or less rare guards, which is rested and retired. So that's a good thing. Sometimes, again, you could catch your opponent by surprise if they don't know that you play this card or if they forgot about it. And most of the time this is the card that will also be very hard on your opponent if they forgot about it. But most of the you're just going for Abu Salam as a lot of defense, or you're going for the Denali Griffin as just getting rid of any of your opponent attacking Regas if it doesn't have resist. If it has resist, then you're pretty sad because you can't use him. That's actually it for the deck. I tried to go as fast as I can through the deck, but still took me like 25 minutes to do so. I would like to thank you guys for watching, and also tell me if you enjoy these kind of deck profiles, because I have a lot for you guys, like Fenrir, Charlotte, Big Belly, like a lot of these kind of decks that I play sometimes just for fun. But this is like, I have a bit of hype to play this deck a lot lately, and the same goes for Great Nature for Standard. Don't get me wrong, I still play Spikes the most, but also giving some other decks the opportunity to show what they could do. Alright, thanks for watching guys, until next time.